This is NHTV2, North Haven Government Television, a service of North Haven Community Television. The following program is brought to you through the support of the town of North Haven.
I'd like to welcome you to our forum on Our Town, Our Rivers. Clean Water Starts With You, which is sponsored by the North Haven Conservation Commission. On behalf of the Commission, I'm chair of the Commission, we've devoted considerable effort to organizing this event. And I wish to thank the panelists who have agreed to share their expertise on an important subject that affects the lives of all residents of North Haven and the state. And by the way, the good news is that they bring in a great deal of expertise. The bad news is that this is good timing because of the floods and all, which underscores the importance of dealing with stormwater management. And they will be talking about that among many other things. I'm going to say a few words about the Conservation Commission, and more than a few, but not many. The Conservation Commission was established more than 40 years ago to advocate for the protection and purchase of land for open space. It consists of 7 members appointed by the Board of Selectmen, and we meet monthly at the Rec Center. During the past 2 to 3 decades, the Commission has initiated the process that led to the creation of the Peters Rock Association, the Open Space Advisory Committee, and the Clean Energy Task Force. We worked with town officials and local environmental groups to protect the quality of the land, air, and water. We provide volunteers for Hasway Central in New Haven and work with the Project Green high school students on a variety of projects. Above all, during the past 11 years, we have sponsored and planned the town's annual Earth Day celebration. And I would urge you, all the commission members know about this, of course, to mark on your calendars or your phones. It's Saturday, April 6th, just around the corner. Yes, right. This event attracts hundreds of children and adults and features exhibits and demonstrations by dozens of environmental organizations and other civic groups, as well as local and state government agencies and departments. I am pleased to introduce our panelists, who will discuss various aspects of stormwater management and explain why and how it profoundly affects the environment and the public's health and welfare. Each panelist will speak for approximately 15 minutes. This will be followed by questions from the audience. And I would urge you, when you come up, stand in front of this chair with the microphone, but don't pick up the microphone, and you'll be heard through NHTV. And I would like to thank NHTV for filming this. The first speaker is Amanda Ryan, who is the Municipal Stormwater Educator at the Center for Land Use Education and Research at the University of Connecticut. Amanda will discuss the state's MS4 stormwater management programs. The second speaker is Lynn Sadowski, the Director of Public Works in North Haven. Lynn will discuss how the town implements the MS4 programs. The third panelist is Laura Margaracci, who is North Haven's Zoning and Inland Wetlands Enforcement Officer. She will talk about the health of our rivers and wetlands and what residents can do to protect them. So Amanda, start us off. Thank you.
Move this way. Let's get out of the screen.
Thank you.
Okay, good evening, everybody. So, as Hugh mentioned, I'm coming here from Yukon Clear, the Center for Land Use Education and Research. So just a quick note about that center, and then I'll get into the stormwater stuff. We were established back in as a center for Yukon back in 2001, and we are we're a combination of entities that make up our center. So we're under the Yukon Department of Extension, the Natural Resources and Environment, and then also Connecticut Sea Grant. So we have 10 faculty members, and we operate mostly under grants. So we have 4 sort of areas of expertise within the water group. So I've been primarily a municipal stormwater educator since I was hired a couple years ago. And then the mission of our center is to provide information and assistance to land use decision makers. So basically, we really work mostly with municipalities on making good decisions for their communities and for natural resources. So with that out of the way. And why am I here talking to you? I'm going to be mostly talking about these new regulations that have been put forth by the Connecticut Department of Energy and Environmental Protection. So we received a 5-year grant, basically, from the DEP to help towns with these new expanded stormwater regulations. So out of the 5 years, we're just about finished with year number 2. So 3 more years to go of this support that's funded by DEEP. So what I'm planning to cover today is to sort of go over what and why is MS4, and I'll get into what MS4 stands for in just the next slide. I'll go over what the key provisions of MS4 are, and lastly, just one slide on the tools and resources that we're providing our office to Connecticut towns. So the first thing, what does MS4 stand for? It's an acronym, and very few people are able to, just off the top of their heads, be able to recite what it stands for. So I'll give you a hint. It's the top one, Municipal Separate Storm Sewer System. So M with 4 S's, MS4. So what is that actually telling us? So basically, it's referring to all of a municipality's infrastructure that has to do with stormwater drainage, and it's also indicating that it's separate from the sewer system. So in the past, these systems were combined, and now most towns, they're completely separate. So we're talking about the storm drains on your streets, the pipes that they drain into, and those pipes bring the stormwater right into the nearest water body, typically. So we're talking about just that whole system of stormwater collection that's owned by the town. And so just where do these regulations come from? And this is a very brief overview, not going to get into the details. So back in 1972, the Clean Water Act was passed, and within that is the National Pollutant Discharge Elimination System. And so this gets at the pollutants in stormwater. So in 1990, this was the first time that municipalities had some requirements that they had to follow with regards to stormwater management. So they call it MS4 Phase 1. And so for Connecticut, our only Phase 1 community is in Stamford. So they were the first ones to get regulated to have to comply with some stormwater management requirements. Later on in 1999, EPA rolled out this Phase 2 of the MS4 program, and so that started to pull in a lot more communities in Connecticut. And so DEP is the administrator of the MS4 regulations, and so they issued the first permit requirements to towns back in 2004. And ever since 2004, it's been the same requirements every year, up until a big update that just happened in 2017. So towns have just recently been hit by a whole slew of new regulations within this program. So that's kind of what towns are reacting to now. So just to give you a visual of who in Connecticut is regulated by these stormwater regulations. So Stamford's our only Phase 1 municipality. So the vast majority of Connecticut is covered, our existing MS4 towns. So those people have been regulated since 2004, including North Haven. And then some of the smaller communities got pulled in with this most recent update. So 8 more towns now have these stormwater regulations to comply with. Okay, that was a brief primer to MS4. And then, so just gonna go into some of the requirements that are actually in the permit. So that permit I was talking about that went into effect in 2004 was 17 pages. A little bit more general. Towns had a little more flexibility in how they reacted to those regulations. This new permit is a lot more detailed and specific, and it's longer. It's 68 pages. So it's a whole new program for towns to figure out, understand, and comply with. So a lot of towns feel overwhelmed by this. They don't have any additional staff. They don't have any additional funds. In fact, they probably have less funds than they've been expecting to have. So it's really an overwhelming prospect for a lot of towns to comply with these new regulations. So what hasn't changed with this update is towns still have to follow the same general procedures. They have to register with the DEP in order to discharge the stormwater into state water bodies. And with their registration comes a stormwater management plan that they already have put together. And this is sort of organized in the standard 6 minimum control measures is the term that is used by EPA in this program. So they're just 6 minimum control measures. I'll get into what those are actually in the next slide. So towns have to have this plan, then they have to implement this plan, and once a year they have to send a report up to DEP and tell them what they've done. And then there's also a water quality monitoring component to this. So those general requirements haven't changed. And then the structure of the requirements hasn't changed. So these are the minimum control measures. This is the same across the country, that these the words that basically that we're using and the way that it's organized. So I'll go through these in the next following slides. I won't read these to you right here. So just one note first is that there's now this new focus on priority areas, whereas the older version of the permit was more just townwide, applied townwide generally. And in this new version, they tried to focus towns on the areas that might be generating the most stormwater pollutants. So they use this priority areas concept. For North Haven, fortunately or unfortunately, basically the whole town is a priority area because I'll get into that in 1 second. So old permit was townwide, like I was saying. Now we have these priority areas. So it's anywhere where any one of these 3 conditions occurs. So number 1's the urbanized area, and that's a U.S. Census data layer. So it's the gray, anywhere where you see gray, and there's gray under the yellow there. So all of North Haven is a priority area. So right off the bat, they kind of have to do everything townwide. So there's also areas that discharge to impaired water bodies, and those are the water bodies that are colored red or purple. Those are the impaired water bodies in North Haven. And then anywhere where there's these stormwater basins that have a high level of directly connected impervious area. And I'll talk about directly connected impervious area in a minute. Okay, so this is the first minimum control measure, is public education and outreach. So in this new permit, the old permit was kind of vague. It was said have an outreach program, for the town should have an outreach program. And now the new permit got a little more specific. There's 4 required topics that everybody has to hit on, is pet waste, fertilizer, herbicides, pesticides, impacts of impervious cover on stormwater quality, and the impact of illicit discharges into the stormwater system. So everybody has to talk about those or provide some outreach on those topics. And then there's additional requirements if you have certain impairments in town. So I know most of North Haven's or all of North Haven's impairments are bacteria, so that's why I highlighted that red there. So there's some extra outreach that North Haven would have to do about bacteria to its residents. The second MCM, which I'm skipping because it's a pretty minor one, is not minor, but it's not as involved as public involvement. So that's really, every year when the town completes their annual report, they have to let the public know it's available. The public can make comment on it. This is the third minimum control measure, illicit discharge detection and elimination. And this might be by far the biggest challenge, or at least the most expanded part of the permit as from before. So this applies in priority areas, which in North Haven is the whole town. So the town has to have a citizen reporting program where a citizen, if they see somebody dumping something into a storm drain that isn't stormwater, they know it's easy for them to find out who in town they should notify to report that. The town basically has to prohibit citizens or anybody from discharging illicit materials into the stormwater. So that's a legal authority requirement. They have to map all their stormwater infrastructure. So every outfall that dumps stormwater into a waterway has to be mapped. All the pipes, all the manholes, all the storm drains, everything has to be mapped. And there's more to that, but those are the highlights. And then in terms of managing construction in town, the towns have to take on a little more legal responsibility, I guess, for regulating construction sites. So you have to require developers developing in town to be consistent with the Connecticut, the big guidance in Connecticut on stormwater management for construction sites, which is the Stormwater Quality Manual, the 2002 Soil Erosion and Sediment Control Guidelines, and any other additional stormwater permits from DEEP that might apply. So it also talks about towns going out and inspecting the construction sites. And then another aspect to this is requiring developers who come into town to sign off on a long-term maintenance plan of any kind of stormwater management structures that they build or implement, like a retention basin or something. So that developer is responsible for maintaining that instead of the town taking on that responsibility, or them not necessarily legally signing anything. So you're requiring developers to take on long-term maintenance of anything that they construct that has to do with stormwater management. And then for town, this is actually minimum control measure 6, but I skipped ahead. So this has to do with town operations, so town properties basically, and town facilities. So there's a whole list of things that towns have to do. Just basically, it's following best stormwater management practices on their own properties. So the permit mentions reducing or eliminating fertilizer use on lawns or fields, properly managing grass clippings and leaves on their town properties, having some kind of pet waste management in areas where there's issues, like in parks where that might be a problem. Discouraging waterfowl like Canadian geese if that's a problem in town. It also touches on, I think here you guys use salt.
Treated salt, yeah.
So following best practices for salt application on the roads and storage. And then there's some additional requirements where if your property, the town property, is near an impaired water body, like in North Haven, if you have one of those water bodies that were up there before, impaired for bacteria, there's some extra things to do if there's a town property near one of those water bodies. And this is also part of that same section, but there's 2 more requirements. So for all the catch basins or storm drains in towns, the town has to inspect every one of those over the course of the permit. And where they're more than 50% full, they should be cleaned out. And then street sweeping should occur once a year for streets and parking lots every spring. And then this is also one more component of the permit, which is there's a focus on low impact development. So low impact development is basically in any kind of practice that helps infiltrate stormwater into the ground where it falls on site. So this is a picture from East Lyme. They have a lot of these tree box filters. They have very sandy soils in their downtown Niantic area. So they're able to put in some of these custom-made tree box filters and receive a lot of stormwater. They actually don't even have a catch basin there. It just receives the stormwater and is able to infiltrate it really well. It happens to be well suited for that kind of thing. So this helps get stormwater into the ground rather than piping it into a water body, going into a conventional catch basin and piping that into the Sound or something like that. So that's that's an example of a low impact development project. So this permit is having towns look through all their regulations to see if there's any inadvertent barriers to low impact development, like minimum street widths is the first example that always comes to mind. That might be something that might be a barrier to LID that towns could potentially change. And also when developers come to town, so the town will have to require them to look at LID features first before putting in conventional features. If it won't work on a site, like the soils don't drain very well, then that's acceptable, but the developer would just have to explain that. And then this last bullet here, stormwater retention standards. So they're requiring towns to require developers to maintain a certain amount of stormwater on site when they develop a site. So this is typically the first inch of rainfall needs to be handled on site for any kind of impervious cover or surfaces that they're going to they're going to construct. And then lastly, there's this concept I mentioned earlier of directly connected impervious area. So this comes up quite a bit in the permit. So towns are basically going to be looking to disconnect impervious cover from the stormwater system. So I'll explain that in the next slide. So so these are two different types of properties here. The property on the left is directly connected because all the rainwater that falls on the roof and on the driveway pitches down to the street, and the street has storm drains. So all this water that falls on the impervious cover in this property goes into the stormwater system. So it's directly connected to the stormwater system. Whereas this property on the right, the driveway is pitched inward, and so when it rains on the roof or on the driveway, it stays on the property and it goes into the lawn. So this is disconnected from the stormwater system. It doesn't add to the stormwater runoff going into the storm drains. So towns are going to be looking to find opportunities to disconnect connected impervious cover, basically. And that's what this retrofit program is all about. So the big goal, and it's a goal, it's not a requirement of the permit, is for town-wide, and this is not a picture of North Haven, it's Cromwell, but showing you just a layer of impervious cover, basically that we've developed. So they're going to try to reduce their total amount of directly connected impervious cover by 2% over the course of this permit, which goes through 2022. So it's a big goal that a lot of towns are overwhelmed by, I would say, but it is a goal, and I think the key is just to start tracking your directly connected impervious cover in town. And that's what I was going to get to next, is tracking those additions and subtractions of directly connected impervious cover. Okay, so those are the key provisions of the permit, and then just one slide on some of the support that we're offering to towns. So I was hired 2 years ago under this permit to be the key point of contact for towns, to ask questions and understand these new regulations. We have a website that we developed for towns as a kind of a comprehensive resource for them to go to find out all things about the permit. We keep adding to it all the time. We have a listserv where people can sign up and get information about these regulations, and also ask questions or share examples of any kind of documents that they use. We're doing workshops and webinars to get out information about specific topics and specific aspects of the permit. And we've created some plan templates and reporting templates that towns can take and kind of customize themselves to help them kind of get some of the big requirements completed. And that's it. Thank you very much. Should I take questions now, or we'll wait? Okay. Thank you. Thank you, Amanda. Open up the next one. No,
Thank you, Amanda.
thank you.
That was great.
Thank you, Amanda. Very informative, and we'll wait until everyone's spoken on the panel, and then we'll ask questions. Lynn?
Okay, thank you.
One of many hats that Lynn wears in this town.
But stormwater is one of my favorites. My name is Lynn Sadowski. I'm the Director of Public Works for the town of North Haven. And as Hugh says, yes, I wear many hats. I support a lot of different commissions and boards in town, so I know a lot of you from there, and it's a pleasure to be here. My role tonight is to discuss what is the town, on the town side, what are we doing to meet this permit? And as Amanda said, as you could see from all the slides, it's a heck of a permit. So we've been in compliance starting from '04 forward. July 1st, 2017, the new permit came into effect, and it is very different. 17 pages and 68 is a nice way to explain it, but it's like, oh wow, it is really different. There's a lot of requirements of it. So what we try to do is focus on staying in compliance, work on what are our shortfalls and how can we close that gap. We have formed we formed a committee, and I'll get into that as well. But for us, focusing on those 6 minimum control measures. We look at those as the 6 goals. The public education and outreach piece, which is exactly what's happening here tonight and on television. In addition, we have all types of flyers and pamphlets and educational materials that we have not only here at the library, online, in our offices. We take them out to schools. We do a variety of things. Public involvement and participation, I'll get into that a little bit more. We cover the IDDE. Government people love acronyms, MS4, IDDE, illicit discharge and detection. So we're kind of focusing on the 6 minimum control measures. The post-construction stormwater, the construction stormwater, and last but not least, Amanda referred to it as town operations. It's referred to in the permit as pollution prevention and good housekeeping. And it really is, in our opinion, it's good housekeeping. What are we doing in the town to kind of keep track of the basins? How are we marking them? How are we cleaning them? How are we cleaning them out? And how are we reaching out to our public about how they can help us? So, as Amanda said, there's several pollutants of concern, and our pollutant is bacteria. It's not nitrogen, it wasn't phosphorus. The state and Yukon helped us, state DEEP, Department of Energy and Environmental Protection. They helped us identify that our waters in North Haven are impaired for bacteria. So what are our impaired waters? Well, you saw the slide with the purple and the red waters. Ours are the Quinnipiac River, Farm River, the Allen Brook, the Muddy River, and the Mill River. So that's where we're focusing as far as our impaired waterways. And so our priority in our impaired waterways, that's where we're going to start our sampling first. We're going to start focusing there. So let's talk about public education and outreach. Tonight is a perfect example for our ways to reach out to the public, ask for help, educate folks, not just here, but on NHTV. We attend all kinds of symposiums. We're parts of conferences. We distribute education materials, and we work really close with Yukon's NEMO group. You've seen us out there with our summer employment, our Quinnipiac University students, our Project Green folks. We've got kids from the high school that we work with who need community service hours, and they're out marking our catch basins. And somebody was kind enough to bring in this, where it says no dumping drains to stream. That is our logo. We put those on our catch basins. We have roughly 2,500 basins, maybe more now. And the markers last about, 5 to 6 years, but then we snow plow some of them off, or we plow roadways. And as time continues on, and when we pave roadways, we often are changing out our catch basins and upgrading our infrastructure as well. So you'll see us to take off the old catch basin tops and take a look at rebuilding our catch basins. We've got to start marking them again. So it's a great program for our summer students, but it's not just, hey, go out and mark the basins. It's identify the streets, send a letter to each of the residents. If they contact you in the field, have a conversation with them. Why is it important to mark our catch basins? Why is it important not to pollute or to dump? We do press releases, so there's a lot that goes into like that one little marker. We're often using links on email. So if you were to go into the Department of Public Works site and you go into the stormwater page, we're like always constantly working with the students, because let's face it, you folks in Project Green, I'm singling out this young man in the front. They have great ideas, and they give us links and show us how to do things easily, and PowerPoints and what really works best. We work with Yukon. Amanda showed you on one of the slides. It is one of the best websites we have, and she talked about listserv. And I can go out on listserv and say, hey, does anybody have a request for proposal for a stormwater consultant for low-impact development and focusing on this? And next thing you know, 20 towns chime in and say, Lynn, I got this, I got that. And they're giving us samples so I don't have to reinvent the wheel. When you don't have a lot of staff working on something all the time, it's great to be able to grab some things from other experts and utilize them and make them North Haven's proposals and get them back out for bids. We sit on the Open Space Advisory Committee, with Hugh and several others, and we're purchasing open space. So we're out there looking for willing sellers. We're negotiating with open space folks, and we've done pretty good. We've already purchased 30 acres and 45 acres last year, and we're looking to purchase another 15 or 16 this year. So we're making headway there. Regional Water Authority. So that is their Household Has Waste Central, their documents and their program. It's a really fantastic program. If you go through and do your spring cleaning, your fall cleaning, and you're going into your garages and under the counters and the cabinets, and you see all your pesticides and your old materials for cleaning, and you want to bring them to household hazardous waste, it's in our taxes. Please do it. A lot of folks a long time ago would dump their oil, dump their paint, inappropriately. Things have changed. Time and people's views on things have changed. So we want to focus on, folks using the Has Waste Central program. They're open on Saturdays from mid-May to mid-October. Great program, doesn't cost you anything. And as students go and volunteers, I know probably a lot of you have been there and volunteered. We're always looking for folks. Ours happens to be this Saturday. We have 2 volunteer days. We're already stacked up with volunteers, so everything is great. But they check your IDs. They make sure you're not touching anything hazardous. They take care of everything, and then they do the reporting for us. But great program. In addition to that, for education, they provide what's called loan boxes. They go out to our elementary schools with these great boxes and talk about different subjects that are related to water and science, stormwater, and how to improve things. Let's face it, from the elementary school forward, that's when kids are bringing home these great ideas. They're getting their parents to recycle. They're getting their parents to understand why we put those no dumping drains to waterways on our catch basins. So it's great to start there. We've gotten support from the Conservation Commission, which we always appreciate, from the Quinnipiac River Watershed Association. We've worked with the EPA, the DEEP, UConn's NEMO group, our Open Space Advisory Committee, you name it. We've worked with so many different people, North Haven Land Trust. Everybody kind of collaboratively supports us, and we try to support them as well. Spend a lot of time working with the Garden Club. They have a lot of the gardens in town, and it's a great idea, because one of the ways to lower our impact on development is to put together rain gardens, and we're going to be kind of taking some next steps in that area at some of the schools. What's public involvement and participation? As Amanda said, she touched on it briefly. Every year we put out an annual report, and this year we decided to do it ourselves. We put together our Stormwater Management Committee. It consists of myself, Laura Magarasi, our town engineer, which was Jonathan Bodwell, now it's Andrew Bevilacqua, and also Alan Fredrickson, our land use administrator. So the 4 of us formed a committee. We also work with Victor Palma in our field operations group. We reach out to other groups, his supervisors, Mike Landino, Mike Maturo, with the goal of putting us all together, putting our ideas together, getting our plan that works for us. And then by the end of January each year, you have to post it on the town's website. Make copies that are here in the library, and also that are in the Department of Public Works, and they're online. And so we try to encourage folks, take a look at it. It's 60 pages, so prepare yourself. But, take a look at it. You might have suggestions. You might, want to see some changes in it. You might want to say, hey, take credit for this. You didn't take credit for this. And you might remember some programs that we didn't include. So we do that, and then at the end of March of every year, because it's due on April Fool's Day, April 1st, we get the program, we finalize the document, and then it goes on the website. We have never been late. Thankfully, we've always had our plans and our annual reports in. We send them to DEEP. We often will send some stuff to Amanda to say, hey, what do you think of this? Not to put her to sleep, but just to give us a sanity check on it. So that's part of that public involvement and public participation, getting our committee together, and also growing some of our committee inside, getting other ideas. We also have quarterly meetings, and again, it's just right now, it's just staff, so that we can kind of get our arms around this rather large permit. We talked about illicit discharge and detection, and essentially, illicit discharge, it sounds like a big, scary thing, but when it rains, contaminants are picked up from the ground. Sometimes cars leak oil, sometimes it's a fertilizer, sometimes it's a pesticide, gets into the streets, gets into the catch basins, and that essentially is illicit discharge. We don't have combined sewer and catch basins, sewer and stormwater. There are some in New Haven, but North Haven, to my knowledge, I don't think has ever had them. So thankfully, we don't worry about that. But when you're kind of rocking and rolling in the 4.58 inches of rain that we had 2 days ago in our plant, I think we were seeing about 7 million gallons a day going through it at 6:30 in the morning. You worry, is it holding? It's an old plant. It's a 1960s vintage, upgraded in 1991, and we're starting to look to make some more upgrades to it again. But it held, knock on wood, wherever that is. But it really did well, and our contracted folks from Veolia really held it together. They were out checking all kinds of things, and they were telling me at 1:30 in the morning there was 2 feet of water on Sackett Point Road, but our sanitary sewer held just fine. So, we do a lot of that with illicit detection. The Quinnipiac Valley Health District also works with us very closely, and QVHD is what we call them. They give us reports on failed septic systems. If we see failed septic systems, we also give them reports, because that's also an illicit discharge. It might not be intentional, but when a septic system fails, it no longer operates correctly, and you will have a discharge. So we focus on things like that. Construction site runoff control and post-construction stormwater management, that gets into our P&Z, or planning and zoning, our land use regulations, enforcing those regulations, which is Laura Magarassi's job. She is the inland wetlands agent for the town. She's also the zoning enforcement agent. So when folks are building something new, we had a lot of activity with the Slate School. They were out doing their construction, and everybody is seeing a lot of activity. It's her job to make sure all the erosion control measures are up and things are staying on the site, not going into the street, and not polluting our waterways. We have a lot of subdivisions going up. You've seen it all over town. We got a lot of residential building. We've got Amazon in town. Very big buildings going on. Big building. Everywhere we look, there's something going on. Our building department is really, really busy, and so that's just the beginning of it. Once the construction starts, we've really got to hunker down on protecting the stormwater and making sure bacteria and pollutants don't get in the water. For us, I'd say some of the bread and butter, especially for our field operations group, which is, our guys and girls down at the garage, they're out there. You think, hey, they're de-icing because it's snowing, but they do study, they understand there's an application rate for the de-icing material. We used to, when I first started in 2009, used to use sand. I don't know if you remember that. And people would say, oh, I hated that. There was always sand on your cars and mud everywhere. And we switched to a treated salt in 2009. And we've actually had a couple different types of treated salt. And even the high school, Project Green and and the chemistry department has asked us, can we analyze it? Can we see what's in it? And so it's a good product that we use, and it's important that we don't use too much of it. That is just as important as the application of it. We've got employee training, whether it's Laura and I and our team, or it's field operations, our guys at the transfer station and the recycling center. Everybody takes for granted that they're just there, but no, they go to training too. It's important that they're certified operators. It's important that our staff know what is important about stormwater, and they have annual training every year, and we have a consultant that comes in that essentially gives them training so that they understand the importance. We've got infrastructure repair and rehabilitation. Again, we start paving roads. We take a look at all the catch basins, and the drainage system doesn't need to be replaced. You're going to see some very large pipes out here when you leave. We have a program here for an upgrade on Central Block, and I'm sure Lois Baldini, our previous library director, is probably watching this, and we used to call it Lake Lois because it would fill up, And now we're putting in different measures to correct that as well. We corrected it once, it wasn't really enough for us, so we're gonna put a bigger correction to it essentially. And, we're street sweeping. We street sweep every road in town at least once, but then there's all the other towns. I'm a biker, I need to go down this road every day. Could you street sweep it? We all know that we probably street sweep the most where we have the most leaves and the most debris on the roads. And then there's the leaf compost. We do our own composting at the end of Powdered Metals Drive. We have a licensed DEEP compost facility. And when the compost is ready, we bring it to the recycling center, and it's for people to take at no cost. Any resident can come pick it up. If you are a gardener, it is awesome material. It is great. And then what we don't use for the residents, we sell. It's a really expensive program overall, but it works. And people they're great about bringing their leaves to the curbside. It's a huge program that lasts, 4 to 6 weeks. And for us, it's a great way to deal with leaf debris, which ends up getting into many of our catch basins. So it's a really important program for us, and it works. And I think I have covered just about everything on what Public Works does, and I know we don't have a lot of time, so I'm going to hand my part off next to Laura Magarossi. She's going to talk about what residents can do.
So you have an abundance of valuable information to process, and Laura is going to add to that. And Laura wears at least 2 hats.
At least. Hi, everybody. I'm Laura, and I am the Inland Wetlands Enforcement Officer for the town of North Haven. And I know that was kind of a lot to take in, so what I'm hoping to do is kind of bring it down to everybody's backyards and see what you guys can do to help the town, but mostly help the wetlands, water courses of the town of North Haven to be as healthy as they possibly can be. One of the aspects of my job is I am very active with the Wetlands Commission as their enforcement officer. I've been doing that about 20 years now, 15 years for the town of Brantford, and coming up on my 5-year anniversary here, and it's all the same. You have these really nice open areas, and eventually you watch them be developed, and it's sometimes for me, because the person who loves nature, it's a hard thing to watch. But we try to do with the Wetlands Commission is make sure that the development that does take place is the very least impactful to the wetlands as possible. Like Lynn was talking about, we look at things like erosion controls. How much soil is leaving the site? If you get soils that washed into a wetland, it like was said earlier, it takes pollutants with it, but it also lands in the wetlands and it buries fish eggs and kills amphibians. It's a problem. So what we try to do is mitigate that problem, and one of the tools we have is like erosion control measures. Another thing we do is we try to regulate the first flush of stormwater. So it's really the first flush that carries with it the most pollutants. So that first inch of water where it's coming down really hard, it's picking up everything that's hit the pavement. It's picking up the oils, the gases, any other spilled antifreeze, whatever, pesticides, fertilizers, and all that stuff is carried untreated. There was a really nice slide that Amanda had of water hitting a driveway, and it doesn't go anywhere else but directly into a wetland. It hits the pavement, gets carried to the catch basin untreated, and hits our water courses untreated. And stormwater is a big, it's a big problem. When we first started looking at this with the EPA, it was mostly when we first started trying to remediate the issues and taking care of the rivers. Most of that was from industrial waste, everything from manufacturing plants, and unfortunately our own sewerage went directly into rivers. And that's in a lot of ways been remediated. I talked to my father, I talked to some old timers. They remember going down by the Quinnipiac River. You couldn't even stand there too long and breathe it in, the stench from the industrial waste. This is different than that, but if you look back at where we've come from when we started those regulations to where we are now, we could do the same thing with stormwater. And I'm hoping that someday people can swim in the Quinnipiac. That's my, as Lynn likes to say, that's my warm and fuzzy dream. But someday that's what I'd like to see. I mean, right now it's Class C. For recreation, you can't swim in it, especially after storms. So that being said, I wanted to talk a little bit about what we can do on our own properties. This is my backyard. I was afraid to lay anybody out here in North Haven and have to face them at the counter one day. So this is my yard, and as you can see, there's the grasses, and there's a slope down towards the back. Back there is, oh no. Let's see. Wait, they said I could also cheat and use arrows. And that's the wetland that's at the bottom of that slope. So I know that anything that I put on my lawn, any fertilizers or pesticides, that's where it's going to end up. And in that little wetland, there's spotted salamanders. Even though it's a scrub shrub wetland, I still get vernal pool, little critters. I get tons of frogs, birds. It's just an awesome thing in the springtime and the summertime to be able to hear that. So I'm very conscious about what I put on my lawn, and I know where the water goes. When it rains, I watch. Obviously there's the slope down, some of the water slopes that way, some of the water goes more out towards the front of my house. Luckily in my neighborhood, I don't have a catch basin to worry about. So I know that nothing that leaves my property at this point is going to be taken somewhere else. And also I don't use pesticides or insecticides or any fertilizers on my lawn because it's a priority to me to take care of and be a good steward of my land. And that's just my belief. I know that there's people that's very important to them to have a nice green lawn, and I support that too. But there are organic alternatives to almost anything, any pesticide, any fertilizer. So that's that. Know where the water goes on your property, and pay attention to what's around. One of the things that can really help protect wetlands from stormwater or things that come off your property are strong buffers. If you look at this, and this is a problem all throughout North Haven, if you look at that channel there, many of our rivers, small streams have been piped for development. People would try to move the rivers so they could build where they wanted, and the streams. And this is one such case. This water goes in a pipe, it daylights here for a while, and then it goes back into a pipe. If you can see, I don't know if you could see it very well, but this is what you'd call an armored channel. On the side of the channels, it's stone instead of soils, which takes away, it makes it so their yard's not going to erode, but it takes away the opportunities for habitat. And if you look to up to the left, what I would like to see and what should be there is a vegetative buffer that will help to slow the stormwater and catch things that are going to fall into that channel. And obviously, if you can see, there's some scour on part of that, and the front foreground on the left, you can see there's bare soils there, and that's likely from water rushing uninhibited, unhindered, right into that channel. So if you have this on your property, if you could install a buffer, that would be really helpful. There's all different levels. Even a 5-foot buffer would be really helpful there. And I'll show you the next slide. It has one that is healthy. So buffers with the plants, they uptake nutrients and pollutants through their root systems. If you don't have any plants, you can't uptake pollutants. It gives the stormwater an opportunity to infiltrate before it goes into the receiving stream, so it's not sheet flowing straight directly into the river. Root systems, which was lacking in that previous slide, hold the soils in place and limit sedimentation into the rivers, which I mentioned earlier has detrimental effect on amphibians and fish eggs. Buffers also provide habitat for insects, birds, amphibians, and mammals. They provide shade to help cool water. A lot of times what happens when water stays on pavement, it heats up and it affects the thermodynamics of the stream. If you have cold water fish, they don't need warm water, and it's detrimental to the health. Also, having buffers, so it could catch litter and floatables, and it makes it easier to clean them up. And if you think back to that slide with the channel, if you have a small watercourse, a wetland, or a stream in your backyard, you wouldn't want to mow to the edge of it because you want to have some kind of buffer established. And that's really the easiest way to do it. Just don't mow to the edge. Let it grow. And if you uninstall lawn to the amount practical on your property, lawns, they have very dense root systems, so water has a tendency to just flow right over it instead of infiltrating. So then you lose the opportunity for the wetlands, for the buffer to do its job and kind of filtering and uptake pollutants. So, if you uninstall the lawn and plant native plants, you're doing a big service to the wetland. And native plants require less care and provide habitat for indigenous species. So you have native plants, you have native birds. You should also choose plants that fit the needs of your property and your lifestyle. Do you need plantings that help stabilize soils? Do you have steep slopes? Are sediments leaving your property? Then you want to get a plant that has, better ability to hold soils and deeper root systems. Also, if you want to, you could attract birds or butterflies by certain plantings, depending on what your preference is. And the last one's a big one for me. Are you pressed for time and need plants that require little to no maintenance? That would be me. I don't have a lot of time to spend in my yard, but I want to do the best I can for it. All right, on disconnection of impervious areas. Well, this is my yard again. Now you see I have the roof drain going into that little spreader. But in my case, and this is just dumb luck because I moved in and it was like this, but I don't feel bad about it because what happens here is the water comes from my roof through this drain, hits the little spreader and goes down and kind of sheet flows into a little depressed area that acts a tiny bit as a rain garden, and it keeps everything away from my wetland and definitely out of the street and even away from my neighbors. So I'm very grateful that I had the natural grades to do that, and it takes a little guilt away. So both Lynn and Amanda talked a little bit about erosion issues. This is a site in North Haven on the left-hand side where we had erosion controls, but the intensity of certain rain events were so strong that, even then, this is what happens. Even with your best management practices, you get sedimentation and polluted stormwater off of sites. So as part of my job, I would go out there and have him reinstall the anti-tracking pad, maybe add some more control measures upslope, like hay bales, anything to keep the soil on the site. Same thing with the one on the right. That was a site where they had just started doing, unbeknownst to us, they had just started doing some grading activities and construction, and they had a total lack of erosion controls. And you could see in that, in that frame, that the sediments are going freely into that catch basin, which, as we already know by now, usually leads straight to a wetland untreated. So this slide is hopefully to show you how you can reconnect water to the earth. I love the rain barrel idea. That's the one on the left-hand side. They have their roof drains directly connected to the rain barrels, and you can't see it, but there's actually little faucets that you can connect your hose to and use that to water your garden and your lawn, if you choose to have a lawn. So it's really helpful. It's a great way to keep water on the site and make it mimic a little more how nature intended as far as keeping it on the property. Let's see. So that's the rain barrels. To the right, actually the center slide, that's a rain garden. And rain gardens, I think, are one of the prettiest ways to go about it. If you can, I'm not sure what state this is from, but when the rain garden, what you do is a lot of times they connect the yard drains or the roof drains to the rain garden, and it's like a depressed area, like a little detention area, and you plant it with plants. And again, the plants, not only does it keep the stormwater on site, but it also is aesthetically very beautiful, and has its habitat. And again, stormwater gets treated by the biological processes of the plants and the root systems. What else? And also, what's popular now in a lot of in the newer houses that we require that homeowners building new houses get the water back in the ground. You can't just tie into the street. That used to be a practice. People would tie right directly into the catch basins, and now, and as we get better at the new MS4, these are some things that we're going to like to see instead of just the direct connects. Hopefully we'll get new house plans in the future that actually propose rain gardens voluntarily without being asked. So anyways, that's that. That's my dog. He looks very sad because he has pet waste and he knows it. Pet waste is a major contributor to bacteria, and the Quinnipiac is impaired for bacteria. Did a bunch of reading when I was looking up, trying to find some fun facts about pet waste, but one of the most interesting ones I saw was that 84 million dogs thing and the trillions of pounds of waste each year. I have not corroborated that. I have no idea, how close that is to being true, but it was staggering. I saw where some communities were installing like composters for dog waste, where you'd put the dog waste right in a little composter, you turn it, and the methane gas would power their street lights. I don't know how that would go in North Haven, but it certainly was, got to be forward thinking, and I don't know, that was really interesting. So when I first had Brutus and the house at the same time, I tried to dig a big hole, thinking that would be the best way. I would just put it in the hole and treat it, and wouldn't let it get on my lawn or in my little wetland there. But it didn't work out. So further research, I just put it in plastic bags, throw it in my garbage, and bring it to the transfer station with my household stuff. So basically, very basic. I'm sure everybody in this room already cleans it up, but a lot of people don't, and it's not something that to ignore. It really is a big deal. So thank you, Brutus. And this is just living more naturally with your yard. Avoid pesticides wherever possible. Fertilizers, if you have to use it, follow the instructions. A lot of people just go out and kind of guess, and you don't want to be doing that, especially if you live near a stream or a wetland. Looking for natural solutions to insects and pests. So I had a bat that roosted in my shingles, and at first I was a little, I love bats, but I was a little, anxious about it. I didn't know what would happen. He was noisy and kind of scary, but, I did a lot of research on it, and 1,200 insects an hour they can eat, and that impressed me. And it's kind of funny because I have a wetland in my yard, which are, known mosquito breeders, but nothing. I didn't get no mosquitoes, nothing. It's awesome, and I think a lot of it's because I don't use pesticides. I have a bat, luckily, but I try to, I just try to live with what's around in my yard, and you could do the same thing to create backyard habitats. You could do that with plantings, sometimes hydrology, install bird feeders, bat houses. seek out biological answers for your pest problems. Passive ways to be aggressive. I made that up. So this is, if you can't do anything else, if you don't have, if you don't have a property you're in control of, what are some things that you can do anyway? And very simple, put trash in secure containers to limit litter. Take your car to the car wash. That was on one of the earlier slides, so you're not using the detergents on your yard and it's not going in the street. Maintain what you have, keeping trees healthy. I spend a lot of time in my yard just cutting vines off my trees, just because I want them to remain standing and healthy, because mature trees, they do hold. I put many gallons of water because there was all different numbers that I could come up with, and I don't know that anybody knows for sure, but in storms and rain events, they hold water on their leaves and on their trunks, and it doesn't touch the ground. It's a good thing, and it helps with flooding. So plant trees, and that's it for that. And here's a turtle that I found with a couple of friends. They're here tonight, and we found him in a little storm water ditch that they had, I don't know, just dug on the side of this trail, and you could see the little bottle next to him of litter. That made me very sad, but it matters where we put things. It matters what we do. It really does. And a little catch basin humor, that recycled bag says earthaware. And that just kind of cracked me up. So basically look around for opportunities to do what you can. Right now there aren't laws that say thou shalt not put pesticides or thou shalt not put fertilizers, and I don't know, just because someone doesn't make you do it doesn't mean you shouldn't think about it. And for me, I'm going to try to keep my yard as free from poisons or anything that could damage the wetlands as possible, because we need them, and I love them. And I hope you guys got something out of this. We have lots of information, and my cards are up there. You can call me anytime with any questions. And I thank you very much for your time. Thank you.
Thanks to all three of you. Excellent presentations. I think a lot to ponder and take action on. We've learned so much, I think, as to what the state is doing, what the town is doing, what individuals can do. And let's have some questions here. And just when you ask the question, come up and stand in front of the chair. Don't pick up the microphone. And we'll have at least a half hour for questions and answers. And I'm sure they'll have answers to all of your questions. Anybody want to step forward?
Hi, I'm Bob Lewis. You said the bacteria is a major concern with our waterways right now. The one that we hear about most is Wharton Brook. Every time it rains, it's getting closed every time because of bacteria. And I was wondering if that's coming down from Wallingford, from all that industrial areas north of that.
It is, but it is not one of the impaired waterways in the town of North Haven.
But that
So we have
runs.
Allen.
Okay.
And one of the things that we do have to do is work with the various towns around us. So if there is a brook that comes, for example, from Wallingford into North Haven, and if it was one of the impaired waterways that we had, we would work with that town. They would do their sampling along that brook, and then we would do the sampling along ours. Our goals would be the same, and we coordinate, but that is not one of, actually, believe it or not, it's not one of our impaired waterways in North Haven.
Okay. But doesn't that run toward from there across Washington Avenue and down through into one of the impaired waterways?
I don't know. I don't think so. I think it's I don't think it's connected
Okay.
to ours, yeah. I mean, our big focus has been Allen Brook. Obviously, Muddy River is a big focus for us, Mill River, Quinnipiac River. Those are all ours. And some of the Farm River, so we do have connections with East Haven, Wallingford, but the Wharton Brook was not one of them.
Okay.
Yeah. Thank you.
Other question? Thank you, Bob.
My name is Sandy Stetson, and I wanted to say thank you. It was a very informative presentation, and I am very conscientious, since I do have a well and septic, about not putting pollutants in my yard. But one of the things that I do that I shall think about in the future is wash my car and let the soap drain down the driveway, which I never thought of that as really being a pollutant. But Laura, you were talking about native plants that one could put on one's property. Do you have any specific suggestions as to what type of native plants one could purchase?
It kind of depends what you want it for, and what your needs are and what your soils types are. It really, there's so many. it kind of depends. Like I would, if I wanted to attract habitat out for deer into my yard or whatever, I would like plant winterberry or other shrubs that have berries, or like I have a lot of high bush blueberry in my yard because A, I like the way it looks, and B, I get lots of birds and insects that utilize it. But if you want to ever come in, I have lots of information at the office. We could talk about it, and I can help you with a buffer planting plan. Okay. If you ever wanted to do that, okay, I'm happy to do that.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Hi, my name is Jason Pham. You mentioned before how we can use plants and root systems to separate the waste from the water, but do we have anything to get rid of or to separate it from the water that's already polluted?
Are you talking about, I'm not sure that I understand exactly.
From the water that's already contaminated within the water system, is there any filtration device that we use to get out of the?
No mechanical devices at this time. I mean, we always felt that our best opportunity is to try to get the contaminants before they get in, and that's kind of what we're shooting for. I don't know if that answered your question.
Retention or detention basins. I mean, they're...
Right, that would be pre-treatment, though. You're talking once it gets in the river, or?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a little harder once it gets in, but I mean, there are ways to...
Yeah, it's not like a wastewater treatment plant where you've got a point source of water going into a plant, and it's going through a series of preliminary and then primary, then preliminary, and then secondary treatments, and then disinfection. It's not like that, which I think is what makes the environmental scientists so concerned about stormwater, because it's everywhere. It's just not coming from a factory. It's not coming from our sewer system. It rains. It comes on. It rains on top of our houses, our roads, and everything, and picks up these contaminants and goes into our waterways. So I think the goal with the MS4 program is to try to educate folks to do things a little bit differently, so that when it does rain, instead of maybe it going from your roof gutters right onto your driveway, you're turning your gutters, or you're disconnecting that, so it's staying on your property, and your property's acting as that filter that you're talking about. It's not a treatment mechanism, but it's a natural treatment. So I think as we work with folks to try to disconnect impervious surfaces, the hard surfaces from the grassed areas. I mean, from the, hard to hard, and we go from hard to grassed areas, we get that treatment that you're talking about before it goes into the waterways.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello, Brenda Taro, and I'm with the North Haven Trail Association. And we have 2 trails that run along the Quinnipiac River, Class C. How do we know where the pollutants are coming from? Because within our town of North Haven, we don't have a lot of industry. So how do you determine where the pollutants are coming in North Haven or north and it's coming south, or?
Fran, that's a great question. One of the parts of the program for the MS4 permit is that we have to sample the outfalls. And first we focus on the priority areas, but just so everybody knows, we have 650 outfalls that we're aware of now. We probably have more. We had around 500 as of 2004, but we know that there's been a lot of development since 2004. So since a lot of the new roads have been put in, new catch basins have put in, new pipelines have been put in, once we essentially bring on somebody to help us with the sampling end of it, because we just don't have the staff in-house to do it. So we're going to be bringing on a consultant. We literally put out a request for a proposal that was due on Monday. And so we're going to be interviewing a few consultants, and we're going to try to select somebody to help us start the not only the mapping end of it, but the sampling end of it. So we're going to be able to answer those questions as we get the sampling done. But as you can imagine, let's say of the 650 outfalls, let's say 20% of them are in priority areas, 25%. We're going to focus on those first to try to figure out, okay, where is that coming from? And then from there, we'll know where the highest bacteria levels are. So we can then narrow down, okay, what's the next set of investigative procedures? So we know at this location, we're getting really high bacteria, but maybe down here we're not. So let's go up that way and look, where could it be coming from? So we don't have answers now, but we've got to do all our sampling and our mapping, and we're going to be using like a GIS mapping company as well as a professional stormwater consultant to help us kind of put it all together. And eventually we will have the ability to bring up a map that shows you where the catch basins are, where the outfall is. You'll be able to click on it. You'll be able to see what the pipe's made of, how old it is, what the latest sampling results are. So that will be a tool for us to use to figure out, how bad is bad and where could it be coming from.
What's the time frame on that, do you think?
We have, I think, till July 1st of 2019 and July 1st of 2020 to do both, I think, the sampling and the mapping, and then 2022 to get everything done, all the outfalls and everything like that. So I'd say, we're trying to do what we can with the budgets that we have. If you watch the Board of Finance, we did request money for the stormwater consultant and also for the GIS part of it. And so we're thinking that there's going to be some repeated costs as we get to where we need to be. But I would say probably between 2 and 3 years, we should have most of it mapped, most of it sampled, and be able to answer that question.
Oh, that's great. About impervious surfaces, how many times do you go to, for instance, Target or the cinemas, and through planning and zoning regulations, they have to have like X number of parking spots per square feet. There just seems to be so much wasted space. I mean, it's all behind the buildings and there's no cars parked there. What is the solution to that? Does it have
to maybe amending the regs?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it would have to be in the form of an amendment, for the number of because now in the planning and zoning regulations, it's set, you need X amount of parking spaces for the type of business.
For the use.
Yeah, but there just seems so much excess,
Right, yeah. And I think we all have to face that we do everything online, so you're seeing a lot of the way America shops completely change. So maybe in time we will be amending the regulations, but again, I think it's more related to that decision would come through our land use department, Alan Frederickson, and then the Planning and Zoning Commission. But you're right, it will have to be looked at. Things are changing.
And I think that's something that would be part of the LID, which is low impact development regulations. A lot of towns are doing that or have already adopted low impact development where you require less parking. You have different surfaces for the parking, like harder like grasses, and also there's the potential to keep parking in reserve so that they don't have to build out all their parking unless they absolutely need it. So it's held in reserve, and you're definitely going to see that when the LID regs are are formulated, and there'll be a public hearing, so as many people that can, come and comment and have your voice heard on what you'd like to see.
Is that coming up soon?
It's probably a couple of years out, but as part of the MS4, we have to have them. And it would be wonderful if you could come with comments. Everybody, this is our big chance.
Sure.
So thank you for bringing that up.
All right, thank you.
Other questions?
These aren't working. Jerry Giordano, the Garden Club. I have a question. You say you want to put rain gardens in schools. We do have a lot of gardens in schools. What are your plans for a rain garden? Like, where would they be located?
Well, Jerry, that's a great question too, because Amanda and her team, they had advised us there was an opportunity for some grant funding if we could maybe reduce where some of the stormwater coming off the school roofs could go. And so they had a bunch of folks, students from UConn, environmental students, and students who are from the School of Agricultural, take a look at places in town, go out with our team, take a look at different locations, and they, I think, gave us something like 25 choices. And because our town engineer just retired and we have a new person who just started on Monday, we thought we'd give them a little bit of time to catch up. And our team is going to meet again on Monday, this Stormwater Management Committee, and take a look at some of the proposals. They gave us what they thought were like a top 9 or 10, but we were looking at some of the other ones, all 25. I like this one, I like this one. And we thought about some of the courtyards at the school. One of them was the high school, a couple of them were the elementary schools. Some of them were at like ACES and the ACES schools, not necessarily all a part of North Haven school system. And we liked some of them. They said the rain gardens, they showed us more like stone, but I like what you guys are doing where you've got the plants out there, because then the kids have an opportunity to learn about the plants, learn about creating the rain gardens, and like Laura mentioned, bringing in the butterflies and bringing in we'll say the flora and the fauna. So we're just starting to think about those, and I'm not sure with the funding how much we'll be able to do, maybe a couple of them, but I could certainly let you know what we choose.
We'd like to be involved.
That would be great. Yeah,
Okay.
we would appreciate that.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks for the question.
I guess they can hear me if I ask a question here. I'm going to address this to Amanda. The state and the town are really doing a conscientious job at taking on this important issue. I'm wondering where the federal government comes into this, because the Clean Water Act is one of the foundations of the environmental effort. Yet there are strong forces that want to weaken the Clean Water Act, which I think would be a disaster. But if something like that happened, would the state just go on its own and continue on the track of MS4 and such? How much autonomy do you have under that umbrella of federal regulation?
Well, yeah, so I'm not even an employee of DEEP, so it would all be very speculative. But it seems like the state we've already gone down this path, but we're almost 2 years into this permit that they rewrote. So my thought is we would stay, on the course that we're on right now, regardless of whatever could potentially happen on the federal level, which who knows about that. But but then again, I really couldn't say. But we're 2 years into this 5-year permit. Town's already gearing up, setting aside budgets and adjusting to these new requirements. So I think we're safe at the place where we are. In terms of future improvements, that all depends on politics, I guess.
Is there federal funding that comes down to the MS4 programs, or is that all state?
No, yeah, that's an issue for towns too. Is that there's a lot more regulations and a lot more requirements and a lot more management of these requirements, but no funding. The state has no funding, and the towns certainly have no funding additional to carry this stuff out.
Thank you.
Sure.
Other questions? Inquiring minds. Standing here thinking, well, I guess we're fortunate that we don't have hog farms and chicken factories in North Haven and in much of Connecticut. So I guess flooding didn't cause some of the problems that it has in other places. Also thinking of Houston, they paved over, hundreds of acres with pavement, and they paid a huge price with Harvey, so. Enough of editorializing, I guess. Other questions? Thank you very much. And wonderful presentations, and I think we all gained much. Thank you.
The preceding program is brought to you in part through a grant from the town of North Haven. Watch town meetings or other videos on demand at nhtv.com.